So we're going to go into the understanding of Golus and Geula, and a huge opening is revealed by the Psukim in Yexhezkel. And the Psukim, it's beautiful to learn this because unlike a lot of other nevuos about Achris Hayamim, sometimes we don't understand what they're talking about. We have vague ideas, but this one we actually lived already. And the fact that we lived it, and we can see the words inside, we can put together our personal experience and the words of what the Navi is saying, and get a very revealing understanding of what Golus is, what Geula looks like, what are the steps, and it's unbelievably clear from the Psukim things. And then we have the additions the Chachmei Yisrael added to explain the Psukim. It gives us a tremendous clarity. So I'd like to start with the Psukim in Yexhezkel, and we'll read the Psukim inside with just to get basic understanding, and then we'll use the sefer to get a deeper understanding. Okay? So we're in Perek Lamed Zayin of Yexhezkel, Pasuk Aleph. Hoysa Ola Yad Adonai v'yotzienu beruach Adonai v'yonechenu b'toch habika v'hini milei ha'atzamot. Right? So Hashem, he put himself on Yexhezkel, and he took him out. We'll have to maybe discuss that at a different time, what that means. And he put him inside of a bika. Right? What's a bika? It's a valley. Okay? So there's a valley. And in that valley was full of bones. Okay? And he took me around all of these different bones. There are many different bones, and the key over here is they're yeveshos. Okay, let's understand what yeveshos means. Ben Adam. He said to me, Ben Adam, and this is an interesting point, just as an aside, that all of the Nevi'im, each one, the way they speak is distinctly different one from the other, right? Ben Adam is something you find in Yexhezkel, you don't find it other places. And the reason for that is that this is the same exact point we were talking about yesterday about Shechina, is that Hashem reveals himself, but the revelation of Hashem comes through the created beings. And therefore, his personality, his midos, his expression, that is, the revelation comes through that. So the same way each individual person talks differently because of who they are, their nevuah comes out differently because of who they are, right? So it's not like, and it's a really amazing thing, it's not just like there's Hashem, generic Hashem. Hashem is expressed in all of human beings differently for the purpose of that the expression of Hashem is much larger than just one tiny little thing we call Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's actually a whole rainbow of experiences, and that's expressed in every Navi, every Chacham in Torah Sheba'al Peh speaks differently, talks differently, and every human being in their own understandings of Torah comes out differently, because that's not by accident, that's on purpose. Okay, so he says to him a question, are you going to revive and bring back to life these atzamos? So like a good nivra, he said, Yomra Adonai Elohim, ata yadata. I don't know, you tell me, am I going to do that or not? Yomra Elai, Hinaver halatzamos ha'ela, Hashem says to him, I want you to prophesize on these atzamos, ve'amarta aleim, and you tell them, nevuah, and then speaking out, Shimud Dvar Hashem, listen to the Dvar Hashem. Ko amar Hashem Elohim, la'atzamos ha'ela, hine ani mevi bachem ruach v'chisem. Hashem says to you, I'm going to bring a ruach and make you alive. To me, this is reminiscent of like Moshe Rabbeinu coming to the Jews in Mitzrayim and telling them they're going to be saved. There's always a besura, like Eliyahu Navi before the Geula, a besura, and telling what's going to happen. I'm going to give you tchiyah. And to me, this is an idea that there has to be participation. Even a atzamos yeveshos, right? There is a certain amount of participation in the fact that they heard and believed and participated as much as receiving and deciding, yes, we believe you, we trust you, it's going to happen. and then I'm going to make you alive. What am I going to do? I'm going to put on you joints, and then you're going to put on you flesh. Now listen to this. It's extremely important, these stages over here. First, I'm going to give you gidim, which connects the bones together, and then I'm going to put on you flesh, and then I'm going to put on you skin. The karamti alechem or v'nasati b'chem ruach v'chisem yadatem ki ini Hashem. Right, and then I'm going to put on you a ruach. What's a ruach? We all know that a person has flesh and skin. Doesn't mean they're alive. The ruach comes and gives a person life. So there's another stage in the process. Right, stage one is that he's going to put on gidim. He's going to connect the bones. Then stage two is having flesh, and having flesh. Secondly is skin, and then afterwards the ruach, which is the life force inside of them. And then, only then, v'yadatem ki ani Hashem. Then you're going to know that I'm Hashem. So Yechezkel, v'nibesi kasher tzivesi, he did the nevuah like he was told. V'hi kol v'hinavi v'hine rash. And then while I was doing this nevuah, when we do our part, Hashem comes and does his part. V'hine rash, v'tikru atzamos etzem el atzmo. First step, the atzamos get closer together. Before they were far apart from each other. Now slowly they come together. Remember all these steps. And then suddenly I saw that there's sinews and there's joints that pull them together. And yet they're just a body similar to the body of Adam Arishon before, where Hashem Yipach Chaim. Just a body sitting there. And then Hashem says to him, you see, there's a separate stage. There's a body. It's you could even call it somewhat alive. It doesn't have a ruach, but it's a total kli. It's ready kli, right? Hinavi ben Adam amat el ruach. Kol marsh Adonai Elohim me'arba haruchos boi haruach. From all the four corners of the world is going to come the ruach. Upechi barugim va'elav yichir, and it will blow inside these dead people, and they'll live. And I did this, and the ruach came. Suddenly all these people stood up, and there was a huge army of people from these atzamos yeveshos. Now, so far, we just had a nice little nevuah that we don't necessarily understand. That's the mashal. We don't understand necessarily what the nimshal is. What is exactly this coming to teach us? Thank God, Yechezkel, Hashem decided to explain it to us this time. Not every single time are the nevuah. Sometimes the nimshal is described, sometimes the mashal is described. Here we have both. What does the atzamos mean? The atzamos means kol beis Yisrael. Okay, so we're going to understand now that there's a stage of Am Yisrael where we are separate bones. Not only are we separate, we're also yavesh, we're also dry. Okay? Hine omrim yavshu atzmosenu va'avda tikvasenu nigzera aleinu. And what's going on with these bones is that they are, because they're so dry, they're saying to themselves, we're lost. We have no future. Right?
Oh, they're saying to themselves, or it's not about them? Okay.
No. Hine omrim yavshu atzmosenu, our bones, va'avda tikvatenu, and our hope is gone. Nigzara aleinu. This is our future. L'chein, that's why we're having this entire nevuah. Yechezkel is trying to impact, Hashem is trying to impact through Yechezkel all of the doros, that we shouldn't get into this problem of avda tikvatenu. Right? You see how bad it is when a person gives on geula. Right? It's one of the things that we get a din on when we go to Shemayim is we mitzapim li Yeshua. Right? It's an extremely important part of surviving galus is the ratzon, the idea that we're going to be, the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built. We're going to have a Mashiach. All of these things are what kept us alive all these generations, and there's a challenge. Because the experience of feeling so dried out and so separated from each other, it's very easy to fall into this pattern of like the Jews fell in the time of Megillah's Esther. That's it. The Geulah is not going to happen. We're giving up. And this is the same thing that happened in Mitzrayim. in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, that 4/5 of the Jews didn't go out according to Chazal. Whether that number is miduyak or not miduyak is a good question, but there was a bunch of people who even though there were people who believed, other people were like what Moshe Rabbeinu feared. They didn't believe. It's not going to happen. And this is even happening when there's makos. Right? Kal v'chomer in our situation where tester, anoich haster aster espanai, it's very difficult for people to hold this level of tshuva. So the point of this nevuah that is being given over is how Klal Yisrael can have hope that no, it's not going to be this way. Even though you feel yavsha, you should know that there's a solution to being yavsha. Okay? Ve'amart aleim ko amar Elohim hine ani posech es kivros seichem. Here's a very important part. Mentioning, I'm going to open up your graves. We'll see what the reference of graves is in a minute. And I'm going to pull you out of your kever, my nation. Where am I going to bring you to? So it's clear that the kever is the opposite of Admas Yisrael. Admas Yisrael is the place where you're going to thrive, and the place where you died and were buried and is Chutz La'aretz, right? Okay. How do you know that I'm Hashem? You don't know because I'm going to open up all of Chutz La'aretz, right? And I'm going to bring all of you out of the kever. Now, we already have experienced this nevuah, right? We know that since 1940, since the war, the Yishuv of Europe, North Africa, all of Iran, Iraq, all of the Middle East, right, within a 30-year period, emptied out completely, almost completely, and moved to the Rubo moved to Eretz Yisrael. Some of them went to America, and a few other places also, but a huge portion of them in extremely short time, which you think about it on any type of rational level, it makes absolutely no sense, right? And it was literally entire kehilos. There was huge kehilos all through North Africa, all through Iran and Iraq, all in Europe. Obviously, it was the war took them away, but even the places where it wasn't the war, technically speaking, because of what happened in Medina Yisrael, and the Arabs started kicking them out. We're talking about millions of people moving in a very short amount of time. And this is already a kiyum of this part of the nevuah. And he's saying, if you want to know that I'm God, I'll tell you how I know. Because all of you are going to be in Chutz La'aretz, and you're not going to leave in a very short amount of time. That's only the first part of the nevuah. It's not necessarily part of the nevuah that every single person who is in Chutz La'aretz will come back. It could be a question of rov, and it could be a question of steps. And Yechidim, Knesset Yisrael as a group, which you could learn from the Gemara and Erechin, is defined by rov. I think that the nevuah is specifically saying that there's going to be a movement which is going to be all-inclusive to people. Individuals will always have a choice if they're going to participate in that movement or not. But it's clear that the main point that I think is for us to take, it's clear that there is a godly event that makes no sense in any way, shape, or form that happened, that the Navi was describing and telling them, you guys feel really out of it, you feel totally disconnected, I'm telling you this is going to happen. We're sitting here watching it that it already happened. It's like, okay, well, now we know the rest of the nevuah is going to happen also. And that's what it really means, Yedatem ki ani Hashem, because you're going to have a idea, a knowledge that Hashem runs the world in a way that it wasn't possible for anybody 100 years ago to have that idea, because they didn't see it, they didn't experience it. And for all of us, we experience it. And what's fascinating is that even though this incredibly wild nace happens, for most of us, I don't know about you, but for me, I didn't even think about this, I didn't know about this phenomenon till not so long ago, right? The historical fact of literally all these kehilos emptying out in a short period of time.
Yeah, no one seems to properly.
It's not only weird if you are participating in it, but it's also completely described in the Navi that's going to happen. We should be getting out posters and saying, "Hello, Nevuah is being the sky in Doredo. Listen, Hashem." Right? We need to be making a big deal about this. Right? The Holocaust is one event that included one chelik of Am Yisrael. If that was just that, you wouldn't necessarily notice it, right? But we're talking about every kehila in Am Yisrael. Hashem ad Yavram Zukanisa, right? That we're davening for the destruction of Mitzrayim should happen until Am Yisrael goes into the land, and it's mentioned twice. So the Gemara in Bracha says one is for Moshe and one is for Ezra. And it was possible for Ezra to come back with a nisim like it was in the time of Kriyas Yamsuf, but because the Doros weren't Zoche, so he came back in the way that he came back, right? The Nevuah is something which is muftach. This is what you have to understand. Hashem he leaves the world in the hands of Bechira to a certain extent. But certain experiences are for sure going to happen. There was for sure going to be kibbutz golios. There were for sure going to come back to Eretz Yisrael. The terms under which we do, that totally depends on Bechir, right? So yes, you're right. It was very painful, and we have to take responsibility for that. Why it had to happen that way. How many people actually wanted to come back to Eretz Yisrael? How many people were like, yes, we can go back to Eretz Yisrael, let's do it, right? So and sometimes we need to be forced. Right, but at the end of the day, what's important to realize, I can't quote this exactly, but if you want to look at it, Rav Wolbe quotes it in Alei Shur. There was a conversation when Herzl went to tell different monarchies about the vision that they should have a Jewish state. So I think it was Bismarck, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm getting the names wrong.
You think it was what?
Bismarck. It was one of the chancellors of Germany. I can't remember which one it was, and he's basically was saying to him, in order for such a thing to happen, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, what's the Russian Empire called then? The Tsar's Empire, and a few others. I forgot which he mentioned. He said would all have to collapse, and that Herr Herzl will never happen, right? And if you look at it from the eyes of Nevuah, it's like, yeah, all of that was a cover-up. My nation needs to come back to Eretz Yisrael. They're not participating necessarily. They have given up on Geula. Hashem's saying, don't worry, I'm going to bring you back. Whether you like it or not, you're going to come back. Now, here's the point. That's stage 1. That's not stage 2. We haven't gotten to stage 2 yet. But Nastati Ruach Bachem, the same way by the Amatzamos Yiveshos, there was 2 steps. Step number 1 was the physical forming of the body. Secondly, was the ruach that come inside of them, gave them chiyus. So that's what he's saying. V'nasati ruach b'chem. After you back in Eretz Yisrael, right? That's the nimshal. The nimshal is already comes back to Eretz Yisrael. That's only step 1. Step 2 is ruach b'chem v'chiyisem v'nachtim eschem ad maschem. And when you have the ruach inside of you, then there's this concept, hinachtem eschem ad maschem. You're going to have a naicha. You're going to have a place where you're settled in the land. V'yadatem, and then you're going to know ki ani Hashem dibarti v'asisi nium Hashem. And then you're going to have a different level of yediyah of Hashem that I spoke and I did nium Hashem. So now that's what it says in the Nevuah. Let's look now at the pnimis of the Svarim, most important concepts. Written in Hazinu, it's clear like this. In parts of Vayelech, it's clear like this. It's all through the Nevi'im, it's clear like this. That we know that the world is run through Seder HaMishpat, which means there's schar v'onesh, and you get what you deserve. And according to that level of hanhaga, it should be possible that human beings can screw up completely, fail, and there won't be anything good come out of the whole situation because it's a 50-50 chance. That is clear in the Chumash and in the Nevi'im that that's not true. The fact that we're going to come back to Etzol, we're going to do tshuva, where the Shekhinah is going to be with Am Yisrael, and there's going to be beautiful Mashiach, is a guarantee. Mm-hmm. The reason why it's a guarantee is because besides the hanhaga of Seder HaMishpat, which has to do with schar va'onesh, there's a more deeper hanhaga. When I say deeper, it means it's more influential. It actually makes the decisions of the revelation of Hashem in the world. That's regardless whether the divine participate or don't participate, it's going to happen. And therefore, and by the bris ben abesarim, when Hashem connected us to Him, what He was saying is that you're going to be the vessel of my revelation no matter what. No matter what. And therefore, it doesn't really make a difference in the long run how you participate. It's going to happen through you. And that's why Am Yisrael, the reason why Am Yisrael is Am HaNetzach, why we survive in all the Doros, as we learned in Haftarah last week, it's because Hashem's name and us are intertwined into one. And if there would be, if we wouldn't come back to Eretz Yisrael, and we wouldn't be the Makam Hashras Hashchina, it would be Chil Hashem. So for the relation of Hashem, we are guaranteed not only to survive, but to thrive at some point or another. And he works it out that there's also a system of schar va'onesh, that through this system we're going to have things that will clean us off and fix us and give us more choices and have tikkunim all those ways. But the main plan, which is for sure going to happen, is the revelation of Hashem in the world. And within that, there's room for human beings to make choices and participate. Like, for example, in the context of what we were learning until now, we had this concept of Shechina. And every single neshama has a place in the body of Adam HaRishon. What you think about what that means is that the tafkidim, the different parts of the Gilui Hashem, there was already a neshama which is guaranteed going to do that. Now, that doesn't guarantee each individual if they're the one who are going to do it. But there's going to be a Moshe Rabbeinu. Whether this Moshe Rabbeinu that was in the Chumash, he had choices. He could have participated or not participated, right? There's just to give an example of this, in the Chidah, he brings down from the, I think it's in the Canaan, that they knew that there was a sefer, Beis Yosef, that had to be written. And there was 3 Yosefs in the Dar who were all Rory Lekach. One was Yosef Chechik, one was Yosef Ben Lev, and one was Yosef Karo. And Rav Yosef Karo was Zoche because he had the most anava, and therefore he was chosen min hashamayim to write the Beis Yosef. So what you learn from that story is the same thing, is that there are certain things that have to happen. Like Mordechai said to Esther, it's not a question. The question is, that I can't guarantee. That depends on your bechira. But the actual plan is definitely going to happen. So this is, we have to keep in mind when we learn about these nevuahs, as far as a Yeshua, that's the point you're bringing out. Klal Yisrael is going to do tshuva. Klal Yisrael is going to come back. There's going to be vilti meno yidach meno nidach. What role, how much it relates to you and how much it relates to Hashem, that's your choice. You can participate and take responsibility and be the catalyst for all these amazing things, or you can be the one that's done to all these amazing things. That's your choice, right? But they are definitely going to happen. Levilti meno nidach eno nidach really means, on the deepest level,
that's in the long run.
The Levilti meno nidach means that every part of all of creation is going to be completely perfect and pure and amazing as a relation of God, like Gan Eden, but even better. That's what it means. And therefore there's no place where it's going to be a person who's going to be eternal suffering or eternal destruction. They're always going to be part of the revelation of Hashem. There's different ways to participate. There are some people who participate by showing what it looks like when you do Resha, and what happens to Resha, as that will be part of the revelation of Hashem, and they will experience all the goodness that comes from the revelation of Hashem through the part that's not so, the process is not so fun, right? But eventually, even the big Yerushalayim come to Tikkun, right? Levilti men nidach men nidach is a real thing, and Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelek olam haba, right? Because we are in our bones, in our DNA, the ones that are connected to the Shekhinah. We will definitely be part of the Sof experience of revelation, because we are the revelation. When it says Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The Shema Yisrael part of it is an integral part of Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. There's no such thing as Hashem Echad in the world without Yisrael, because we are the monitor of that CPU. We are the place that revelation happens. So we are definitely going to participate. The question is, it's much more fun if you participate by being active. You get much more pleasure, and you have much more pain if you resist and don't participate in a good way. Okay? Get the big picture of something which is universal. The Navi is all-inclusive. It's bigger than any one of these individual tzaddikim who had their opinions. And within that, when you start understanding the big picture, then the details of each tzaddik's tachlis, what he was trying to do, becomes very obvious. Like, oh yeah, that's important, and that's important. And how it all works out, well, that's the salat of Klal Yisrael, right? But the Navi is broader than any of these things. So I don't want to get caught up in details like that. I really want to focus on the main message, the main concepts that are being given over, and then we will totally be able to deal with all the projects. Okay, so you asked that we should go back into the psukim and go slow. So let's do that. Okay, so I'll use the sefer and we'll go back into the psukim and we'll skip a little bit to page Lamed Daled, and then we'll go back into the psukim, and then we'll see what the Pnimiyat Torah adds. We'll do it in that seder. Okay, we'll do pshat and then we'll go to sod. So first of all, the point that he brings out is Hashem pakad es amo. Clearly, we have experienced something which all of our forefathers were looking for. V'nisim v'niflos atzum heshuvenu la'artzenu la'achal garas mara v'kasha u'barach Hashem asher gavach chasta aleinu hotzienu mavas l'chaim ma'afei la'olam yeshibur ol goyim l'cheruseinu be'eretz Yisrael hanosos perusei ba'ayin yafel b'niyah hashem meleh. Right, the difference, the shift that Am Yisrael is able to do just because we moved back into our land, that in a very deep way we have freedom of religion, of doing Torah and mitzvahs in a way that wasn't really true anytime we were in Golus, is already a huge, huge miracle. And the fact that it happened through exactly the way Navi described of kibbutz Galius should give us a lot of chiyus and koach that, wow, this is happening. But as we spoke about, the nevuah of the Yechzkel, the geula nasa b'shlavim u'b'madrigot. The way the nevuah works is clearly both in the mashal and in the nimshal. There's steps. Hashlav rishon hu kibbutz Galius, and then we're going to go back to the psukim in a minute. Shu sov kiruv ha'evarim el haguf shu yachtav ze el ze. Ze usod v'tikeru atzamos etzem el atzmo. So first of all, right, we started off. Let's go back into the psukim. Okay, so now we started off. We have a bika, we have a valley of psukim, right? And Hashem says to Yechezkel, are you going to make these atzamos alive? And he says, I don't know, you tell me. And then let's start by the nevuah. Ko amar Adonai Elohim atzamos hine ani mevi b'chem ruach v'chisi yisem. I'm going to bring you a ruach and you become alive. Now, how does this ruach work? V'nasati aleichem gidim ve'aleis yeschem basar, and I'm going to put on you. We have to understand what gidim are, right? And then on the next shlav beis is having flesh. V'karamti aleichem or, then you have skin. V'nasati b'chem ruach v'yechisem yidatan ki ani Hashem. He says 4 different stages, right? And then let's look at the actual nevuah. What happens? V'nibesi kasher tzivesi, v'yikol v'hinavi v'hinei rash v'tikeru atzamos etzem el atzmo. The first shlav that actually happened was all of the atzamos slowly came together, right? So says Reuben in the sefer, me'ein says v'tikeru atzamos etzem atzmos shu hiskarvus me'ein chibur shchuni v'lashon shchenus v'hu ma shavaru anu shehiskatzu le'artzenu v'gorem anu liyad zeh v'kiruv makom ve'enenu mifurorim ba'arba ruchas hashamayim. First of all, used to be Am Yisrael. There was Teimanim, there was Moroccans, there was European, there was all these other things. Suddenly, Tikrun, the very fact that he came, if you take the picture of atzamos that are strewn, you have this bone, you have the leg bone, and the arm bone, and this bone, they're all over the different place. Which means that each part of Am Yisrael has no connection with the rest of Am Yisrael. So this Kehila is the leg Kehila. And they're super duper strong on their ideas of what Yiddishkeit looks like. And there's another Kehila which has a totally different version, right? And they're like, and it's expressed, of course, impacted by the different Am they're vested, just like the Mivtah, the way Lashon Kodesh was even spoken is different, right? But also the whole minhagim, and the way they sing and the way they culturally, what's important. If you walk into a Sephardi shul nowadays, everybody's sitting down. You ever notice that? You walk into a shul, everybody has a quiet place. You sit down, you start walking around. It's like, what's wrong with you? Are you crazy? I mean, movement, like what? Right? You go up to an Ashkenazi shul, everyone's moving around and doing this and doing that. Right? It's a totally different experience, right? We're talking about very deep things because each one of these atzamos are actually very different. But the chiddush of Golus was the very fact that each one of these atzamos are in a totally different place in the world, right? And as the way the Vilna Gaon in the end of Sefer the Tniusa, he describes it. He says, well, he's doing the inverted version of Yechezkel. So let's hear that how the description of Golus happened. And then we can understand what Yechezkel is doing to invert that process. So he says, we don't know when the Gula is going to happen. Now hear how he describes the Golus. After the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it's very important to realize the Beis HaMikdash was a very integral part of this. Yotza ruach ateres roshenu v'nish'anu rak anachnu hu guf shala below nefesh. He describes this point, and I want to leave this on the side for a second because we're going to understand this better when we get to the end of Yechezkel. But it's just a body, no ruach, right? The same way in the end of Yechezkel, we have a body before we have a ruach. The shlav of Beis HaMikdash took out the ruach. Only we had a body. The yatzani chutz la'aretz hu akever, and then what do you do with a body? You bring it to a burial place. So Eretz Yisrael is a place of life. Eretz HaChaim. And for Am Yisrael, not for Goyim, for Am Yisrael, going out of this Eretz was like being put into a kever, like the Psukim in Yechezkel say clearly, right? That when later on it says, "V'halesi eschem mikivrechem," and hinni al pasach es kivrosechem, v'halesi eschem mikivrosechem ami, v'halesi eschem al admas Yisrael. It's clear in the Psukim that the definition, the spiritual definition of Chutz La'aretz is a grave, right? So first you get put in the grave, and then listen to how he describes Golus. Then the worm comes and starts eating our flesh. In Chutz La'aretz, the process of decomposition of this beautiful body called the Shechina and the Ruach inside of it was slowly eaten alive, and all of the flesh, the Go'olei Kochavim, which is there like the worm, slowly ate this flesh. Mikol makom hayinu chaburos yeshivos gedolos, but they were still, the skeleton was still together. There was yeshivos gedolos. What happened in the Churban Bayis Rishon? The Choresh Mazgir went they went to Bavel, and before the Golus happened, they already set up an entire yeshiva system which stayed until Bavel till 1000, till the beginning of the Rishonim. Right? There was a huge place of clarity of Am Yisrael, and even in Bayis Sheni, when there was a tremendous Churban, that was in place. Right? And that's how we have all Talmud Bavli. There was still yeshivos gedolos, and then what happened was nikrav habasar v'atzamas nifrezu pizor achar pizor. Then what happened is instead of Klal Yisrael being in one place, when we left, we went to Golos Bavel, pretty much most of us were sent to where? To Bavel. And then there was the question of the Aliyah afterwards, back there to Yisrael. By Yesheni, when Edom took us, there were Arba Kanfos Haaretz. We were taken to slaves in Rome, and the Roman Empire put us all over the place, and right? And what happened was, this Pizor, this is what's described in the Navi as all of these Atzamos going to Arba Kanfas Aretz. So now no longer, you don't even see the skeleton. You don't even see the remains of Am Yisrael functioning as one unit. You don't have Yeshivas Gedolos, where it's clear, where the Torah is running the Tzibur, and you have everybody functioning in the same basic goal of going back to Eretz Yisrael, and we're waiting for it. Nah, you have this part of Judaism is expressed, and the rest of the part of Judaism is completely ignored, because all they have is the hand, and all they have is the leg, right? And then Mikol Makom Hadayan Atzamos Kayamos. Then the Atzamos were actually existing, but Sheu Tamidei Chachamim. What does Atzamos mean? Atzamos are the Tamidei Chachamim, the big people, Mamidei Haguf, the people who were the strong people who held the goof up. Ad Shenikru Atzamos, until these Atzamos, what does it mean? Yeveshos, they lost all of their chiyus. They started becoming mitporer. Right? Lo nishar el hatarvud harekev meitanu v'nasa afa. There's the leftover of the bones afterwards that it becomes dirt. That's what we are left with in Eretz, in Chutz La'aretz, without the great Tamid Chachamim that we have. Shachal afar nafshenu v'anachnu mekavim ad l'tchias hamesim hisnau mi'afar kumi v'yar b'ruach v'morom aleinu. So when Yechezkel is describing Atzamos that are all over Klal Yisrael, all over the world, what he's describing, the way the Vilna Gaon says, is the Nimshal, is that the Mamidei Haguf, the Kochos of Torah that we had throughout the Doros, that held us, the Amoraim, the Tanoim, the Amoraim, and you see, the read of the Doros goes less and less. The Rishonim, and then the Zman Achronim. Before we came to Eretz Yisrael, what did we have? We had some Tamid Chachamim, but it was nothing like we had before, right? That's a respective process that was supposed to happen, of going to Chutz La'aretz and slowly dying. And this needs to be understood. Why is this an important part of the process? Why is it important to, if Hashem is telling us, you started off as Atzamos, this was a plan, right? Why is Golos an important part? We're not going to discuss right now, but it's a very important idea to understand. Why is dying part of Tchias HaMesim, right? The same way Adam Rishon had to die in order to come back to Tikkun, Klal Yisrael has to die, and then in order to have a rebirth. But the point that I was trying to bring up in this Gaon is that the definition of what these Atzamos Yeveshos means that first of all, the Atzamos themselves, the Tamid Chachamim, didn't have chiyus, the Mamidei Haguf. But secondly, all of these bones were separated so far from each other that there wasn't a cohesive version of what Am Yisrael actually looks like. If you ask a goy, what is a Jew? Well, it depends on what neighborhood he lived in to describe those Jews, right? But the actual picture of Am Yisrael as a unit, we lost until today, right? So the shlav that the first happened was, as the Yechezkel described, these things. V'tikru atzamos etzem el atzmo. Etzem el atzmo means you're going to build a skeleton. And by the way, the way the Psukim read, right, in the beginning, in order for this to happen, hinani mevi bachem ruach v'chiyisem. In order for the atzamos, even before they have basar, and even before they have ruach, right, and they don't have gidim, right, they're just a skeleton. But there is some level of chiyus that instead of being yeveshos, the first shlav is just the fact that the atzamos have ruach inside of them, they have some kind of chiyus, right? And this is what we saw, that there was a hisorus from every part of Klal Yisrael, in every different place, of people, instead of saying of the tikvaseinu nigzur aleinu yavshu atzmaseinu of the tikvaseinu, suddenly people were talking about, we're going to go back there, so we're going to make a yishuv over there. And we're not talking about huge Tamid Chachamim who were doing this. Remember, these Atzamos were near Kav, the Mamidei Haguf were near Kav. We're talking about people who were very, very far from Yiddishkeit. But what happened was, there was some kind of ruach that started up in them. It's like, we're going to go drain the swamps. Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? There's no country there. Yes, we're going to go do it. We're going to die of malaria, but we're going to do it because our children are going to have a place to live. What is that? That's this ruach that comes into the Atzamos, that these Atzamos are not a defined version of Am Yisrael at all. They're Europeans, or they're this, or they're that, but they have this crazy strength inside of them, that they're no longer dead, that they're going to start the kibbutz Start bringing people back. Before there's even a country, before there's anything, right? And then, slowly but surely, there's a next shlav, which is, as Yechezkel said, later on in the Psukim, Posech es kivrechem, v'helesi eschem mikivrosechem ami, v'helesi eschem el admas Yisrael. Hashem, in a supernatural way, and the reason why we know it's supernatural is that it shouldn't happen. It makes no sense, even though, like, while you're watching it, you're like, well, yeah, I mean, there were people who walked around North Africa and convinced Jews to come, and they were kicked out of Yemen, and they were kicked out of this place, and a million Moroccans, they came in 1960. Yeah, every one of these things, like, well, I guess that could be, but you look at it all together and say, no, that's crazy, right? Halesi eschem, I am bringing you back from Chutz La'aretz, and what that stage looks like is now just the atzamos, becoming now a skeleton. We're not alive in any way, shape, or form, right? There's not even gidim. Forget about basar. All it is the fact that we came kibbutz golius into one place, shlav or aleph, right? So don't have very high expectations of what this am is going to look like, except the fact that they are no longer separate across the entire world. That's shlav rishon, okay? Now, after that, there's a shlav of olim habasar hagidim. Now, this is describing the beginning, aleh mitzbates hatchios tchilas achius, ke'ein chayim pratim l'chol ever. Says Reuven Sasson, what happens when you have basar and gidim? What is that describing? It's now every single individual organ, individual part of the body has its own individual chiyus. Ki nivdal hu mi etzen hameis she'ein ba basar ki chayhu sheyesh ala basar achadayin kol zos b'li ruach chayim. Right? The body is not alive. There's no central organizing power that makes every part of the bria. But there was a change in each individual organ that instead of being now just etzem, it itself became a more developed, more towards life being, in that its flesh and joints came together. Okay? So now the achamikan baruch nosefes. Okay. All of this happens before the shlav of where the ruach comes in, where he says, Vayover yomer Eli. Here. Vayisi vini alechem gidim ubasar lev vayikram aleim or milamala v'ruach ein bahem. Right? So he's describing, I saw and I see gidim ubasar aleha vayikram aleim or milamala. They even have a protective. What's the purpose of or? The purpose of or is to protect this beautiful body that was formed. Ruach ein bahem. So, in some sense, there was a kibbutz golius. Not only are these skeletons, not only are they sitting next to each other, they actually formed one cohesive unit. They fit together with each other. You can describe, okay, well, this person's doing this job. This part of Am Yisrael is doing this job. They were functioning somewhat together, but it's dead. It's not alive. But it's a whole body. And it has flesh and everything. So it looks kind of alive, but it's not alive. And here I want to make a point that there's a famous story of a king who got angry at his son and he threw him out. And the kid went to live in the garbage dumps. And, he's having his time in the garbage dumps. And after a while, his father has Rahmanis and he wants to bring the king back. So he says a message to the king, listen, my son, I love you. I want to take care of you. What do you need? So the kid says, I'll tell you my problem in life. Is in the garbage dumps, there's a lot of competition because everyone's looking for the scraps, and it's always difficult for me to actually find my scraps among other people. So what I really want is to have my own personal garbage dump, right? So my point is that we have never experienced what life feels like. We don't even know what it means. We don't know what it means, the Shechina is Shower and Am Yisrael. where Am Yisrael has this ruach that is the essential life force behind all of the different atzamos and gidim and basar. We never experienced it. We maybe heard about it, we can learn about it, and we're going to learn that Pneumius HaTorah is all about that ruach.